1 year ago, we started a journey that would change our lives forever. We left behind our comfortable city lives and moved across the country to take on a forgotten farmhouse, crumbling outbuildings, and 13.5 wild acres on the west coast of Wales. We're Gav, Nicole, and of course Seren the dog. If you're new here, welcome. There's a lot to catch up on. And if you've been with us from the beginning, don't worry. We've got plenty of never-before-seen footage to keep things interesting. The property we bought consists of a farmhouse, a series of outbuildings in various levels of disrepair, and 13.5 acres of land with various streams, wooded areas, and a lot of overgrown fields. So much like the Von Trapps, let's start at the very beginning, summer 2024. After a very long and dragged out sale process, we were ceremoniously handed a takeaway box full of keys and could finally call ourselves the proud owners of a derelict farm. But there was no time to rest on our laurels. In just 3 days, the static caravan, which would become our home for the foreseeable future, was due to arrive. It needed to be plumbed and wired in immediately, as we'd be moving straight onto site to save money. So within a matter of hours of getting our keys, we were already at work. And luckily, we were just in time to have everything sorted for the arrival of our caravan. With a place to live secured, we could finally turn our attention to the rest of the farm. Having sat empty for years, the whole property was completely overgrown. I quickly became very well acquainted with a strimmer and a shovel in those first few weeks. Inside, the house was really stuffy, and a lot of the windows were bolted or boarded shut, so we spent some time breathing life back into the place. There was also still a fair amount of furniture and personal belongings. Since we planned to reuse or restore many of these items, we carefully cleared them out and stored them safely away before the renovation chaos could begin. The house itself had good bones and the stonework was in excellent condition, but inside was a different story, with wood rot, water damage, questionable materials, and plenty of bodged repairs. To give the house another 120 plus years of life, we made the tough call to strip everything back to the stone. Now, this decision has definitely been controversial with some of our viewers, but as you'll see in the rest of the video, it became more and more obvious just how necessary this process was. That being said, our main goal has always been to use as many traditional methods and materials as our budget allows. We'll be reinstating original features like the doors, fireplaces, and much more wherever we can. We also spent quite a significant portion of the summer tackling a number of unplanned home improvements. First up, a car parking area, as deliveries were quickly becoming a logistical nightmare. Then we added a gravel path to the caravan, as it turns out living in a Welsh field is pretty muddy. And a bin store / boot room because there was zero room in the caravan. Then came the real MVP of the season, I don't say this lightly, but we wouldn't have survived our first winter in the caravan without it. And then finally, while setting up my office in the spare room of the caravan, we had our first major curveball, as we made the very unwelcome discovery of some widespread rot, which ultimately resulted in us having to rebuild not only my office, but the adjoining bathroom as well. So it's safe to say we were absolutely raring to go once we were finally freed up to start working on the house again. We started work in what would have been the more formal living room downstairs, as our surveyor had flagged some major concerns with rot in this room and advised immediate actions. And you don't need to ask Gav twice to have at it with a piece of 2x4. Once the problem child room was tackled, we could finally begin as planned, working top down through the house. As upstairs we had highly flammable polystyrene roof tiles, inappropriately sized roof timbers, rodent infested insulation, and a lot of water damaged chipboard to be removing. If you've watched from the start, you'll know that Gav's approach to health and safety is, shall we say, flexible. We also grabbed whatever moments we could to reclaim bits of the land, uncovering the history of the farm, and in this case, its past as a mill. And even without, as many people have pointed out, the right tools, getting outside and making progress beyond the house was always a welcome change from the constant dusty and grimy demolition. And of course, we couldn't round the summer up without mentioning our adoption of Seren. We saw Seren pop up on a local rescue centre's Facebook page, where it explained that they had taken her in as she was on her last day at a council shelter and was due to be put down. She had been found on the streets and had no one to claim her, and as soon as we saw her, we knew that the dog was for us. Now it's safe to say our lives have never quite been the same since she turned up, but there is never a dull moment with her around. Now that the summer was coming to a close, while a lot of our time had actually ended up being spent outside of the house, we'd still managed to get the house cleared, all of the ceilings down, a number of the walls down, adopted a dog, and basically rebuilt our caravan. So whilst our original plan had pretty much been thrown out the window, it was all steps in the right direction. So the renovation has been pretty full on recently, both physically and mentally. And so we've been keeping ourselves busy by daydreaming about our first holiday. And the plan is to head off in our lovely van Barnaby, which is obviously half finished, and do a bit of a road trip around some countries in Europe. Now, we've both done a lot of travelling in our time, and we know how stressful it can be when you arrive in a foreign country and you're trying to sort your phone out, avoid surprise data roaming charges, and also trying to do this all in a different language. That's where this week's sponsor, Saley, comes in. No need for a physical SIM card, local phone shops, or trying to use dodgy public Wi-Fi.
Just download the app, choose the countries you're visiting, and then you're all good to go.
Saley is offering our viewers 15% off if they use the code HOLDINGS at checkout, so you can enjoy stress-free roaming wherever you're headed. As autumn arrived, we were finally able to focus more time on the inside of the house. Over the years, the house had been badly patched with cement, which was trapping moisture and causing significant damp issues. And with our plan to insulate the internal face of the external walls to improve energy efficiency, we had to face the daunting task of removing a complete hodgepodge of plasters from the walls. Where the walls had been lime plastered, the removal process was relatively manageable, but where they'd been covered in concrete, it became an incredibly slow and laborious task. The master plan is to repoint the entire house in lime, addressing all the problem areas. Then we'll install a breathable insulation board on the interior side of the external walls and finally replaster everything using lime. We're hoping that this combination of traditional lime and breathable modern materials will future-proof the house for generations to come. Outside, we continue to fight the good fight, slowly but surely getting some of the outbuildings back under control. The pole barn had been left in a bit of a state by the previous owners. It was the only area on the whole property that still had a large amount of stuff in it, and it was going to take a while to get sorted properly, but we gave it a first pass to try and get it a little more organised. As we moved further into the season, general smallholding tasks started to take priority, like clearing, chopping and storing wood, and opening up overgrown tracks in preparation for winter. Meanwhile, Seren had been settling in beautifully, and we discovered her love for heavy machinery. When the time came for the drainage testing for the new septic tank, she really came into her own. We could really feel the weather starting to change towards the end of the month, and when the rain arrived, it arrived with a vengeance. One particularly memorable Sunday night saw Gav thigh deep in freezing water trying to clear a blocked culvert. Thankfully, we had a brief window of good weather for a visit from Gav's family and a little bonfire party. By the end of autumn, we had managed to clear a load of the plaster off the walls, lifted the majority of the floor tiles for the underfloor heating, and also managed to completely clear the rotten stud walls upstairs. So it felt like we'd made some pretty major steps forward. Unfortunately, the weather issues didn't stop there, as at the start of December, West Wales was hit with the worst storm it had seen in 80 years, and the pole barn that we'd been so lovingly sorting out took a major hit. Much to my dismay, as I had a real love for that old barn, the majority of the building was beyond saving, and our lovely neighbours had to come to rescue us and pull it all down. And then we had to cut it up and store it. These were all jobs we definitely hadn't planned to be on our lists. And it wasn't just the buildings that were affected. Across our land, we lost a number of mature trees, and many were too dangerous to be left standing. So due to the fact our new woodshed had flooded, we needed to make a temporary store whilst we worked out what to do with all the wood. We were also just working through stripping back all of the old lime and cement. However, we did have some help in the shape of my uncle and dad. Christmas came and went, and we were soon back at it. And with every wall we stripped back, we were uncovering more and more damage. But the real curveball occurred on the front wall of the house. Gav had literally spent weeks trying to get the concrete off this wall, and just as we were reaching the top to finish it off, he uncovered the problem. The lintels and joists that had sat in this part of the wall and near the concrete had completely rotten. This was quite serious, as there was nothing holding up this portion of the house other than the concrete that we'd just removed. The wood was quite literally crumbling, and if we hadn't removed the plaster, we might not have found this, and we could have ended up with a really serious problem. And it went to show how important using breathable lime mortar on stone buildings really is, because at the front we had widespread rot, then at the back where lime had been used, the lintels were still in great condition. So any plans we had for the start of the year quickly went out the window, and the priority was to get the floor supported and those rotten beams fixed. There really wasn't much we could do other than just go ahead and work out how to fix it. So we set about removing the stones above the first rotten lintel and building up some pad stones for the new lintels to sit on. We got a local traditional building specialist to come in and teach us about stone laying, so we could continue the repairs ourselves. Another big process was to strip the beams so that we could treat them for rot and woodworm, and hopefully further protect them from any damage. As sandblasting was out of the budget, we had to resort to paint stripping, which turned out to be quite the challenge when you're working above your head. In the end, we had 4 windows that we had to rebuild, 12 joists that we had to splice, and every beam in that front wall that had to be treated. All in all, this discovery set us back by about 3 months. Thankfully though, as we came to the end of the winter, the strip out was coming to the end, and we removed the last of the rotten walls and took out the last of the fireplaces for restoring. Then, with the help of my parents, the last of the floor tiles were lifted. The plan was to dig down and install a system to help manage the moisture and help with insulation, which again should make a big difference to the issues in the house. We would then be laying the quarry tiles back on top. As we were still feeling the effects from the flood in the main woodshed, and the wood was turning into something from The Last of Us, we had to face the facts it wasn't going to work, and so my temporary solution that had been pulled together before Christmas got itself a glow up and went double-deckered. Now, obviously we had lost the best part of the winter to the lintel and beam repairs, but we finished up heading into spring with the house finally stripped back and ready to start putting the place back together. We kicked off spring with the delivery of our new windows, and this was really the boost that we needed. When we bought the house, the windows were a real mix of poor quality and damaged UVPC, and failing and smashed wooden sashes. so it was all just in a bit of a sorry state. Whilst we sadly couldn't afford wooden windows, as the cheapest quotes were starting at around 35k, we spent a really long time tracking down sash UVPC windows that matched the original style that were in the house, and we were really happy with the end result. This was also one of the few jobs we handed over to someone else, and a brilliant local father and son team smashed it out in just a few days. I did manage to save the original wooden windows though, with the plans to hopefully reuse them in a future potting shed or something similar. With the weather improving, it was time to turn our attentions back to the trees, both the ones we'd already cut down and the ones still on the to-do list. Gav's parents had come up for a visit, so we made the most of the extra hands. We'd also finally cleared all the old tin from the pole barn and taken it to the scrapyard, which freed up the space for, yes, another wood store. And next up was removing the stairs. Taking them out made it both easy to restore them and carry on with the floor work underneath. Finally, spring was really starting to show around the farm, and we were able to plant our first trees into what would become our orchard. We spent some time clearing out a blocked river in the hope to help the drainage. And even got a bit of our very questionable fencing repaired. The Then things got serious and the heavy machinery came into play. After we sorted out some technical difficulties and got the digger into the house, it was all systems go, and it was time to dig down so that we could get some insulation, drainage and heating in. We also, for safety reasons, had to remove the range so that it could be checked over to evaluate if it was safe enough to keep in the house. And then we also took the other fireplaces back to stone. Next, we ensured the floor was all level and installed a geotextile fabric, which allows the moisture to pass through but not silt and debris. We then barrowed in 11-ton bags worth of recycled glass called Glapor. This product has both wicking and thermal properties, so works really well with old stone buildings to mitigate damp problems. We then made sure this was roughly level and compacted it. Finally, we added another layer of geotextile, and then the gridding in preparation for the underfloor heating pipes. And that brings us to the end of everything we achieved in our first 365 days in the house. We made it through 4 Welsh seasons and some historic weather events, but one thing's for sure, it was never boring. We of course have to say a massive thank you to all of our friends, neighbours and family who've come up to help us throughout the year. Without them, we'd be so much further behind. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you who've been watching along, offering your support, helpful advice and encouragement. It really does make a massive difference. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please do remember to subscribe to the channel. And you can also find us over on Facebook and Instagram, where we share loads of behind the scene bits to keep you going between videos. And with that, all that's left is to leave you with the clips of a cow who decided she really hated Gav. See you next time.